Hello, everyone, and welcome. Ready to dive into a field that's breaking out of science fiction?
Yeah, we're talking about implantable brain-computer interfaces, or iBCIs for short.
iBCIs. And we're not just speculating, we're going deep into a Nature Reviews bioengineering article that gives a snapshot of iBCIs currently in, get this, clinical trials globally.
Globally is right. This isn't some far-off future tech. This is research happening right now.
And this deep dive is all about catching you up on where this tech is right now, the breakthroughs happening as we speak,
Yeah,
and what it could mean down the line.
exactly. What it could mean for patients, I think that's key. We're talking about helping people with conditions like paralysis or severe speech impairment.
Which the Nature article highlights really well. For people facing these challenges, iBCIs aren't some, cool gadget. They're potentially life-changing. This is about regaining lost abilities.
It's amazing because often the brain's signals, they're still there, even when the body can't execute the commands.
Right.
iBCIs essentially step in to, interpret those signals, translate them into action.
Whether that's controlling a prosthetic, moving a cursor on a screen, even communication.
Through a speech synthesizer, precisely.
It's really remarkable. And speaking of remarkable, the scale of research already underway is, frankly, mind-blowing. This review identified 21 different research groups across the globe actively developing iBCIs.
With 28 clinical trials either done or in progress, and that's more than double the number of groups from just a few years ago.
Wow.
So that shows you the global interest is huge, even though the U.S. is leading the charge right now in terms of sheer numbers.
It's a global effort, but with roots going way back. You might be surprised to learn the first long-term iBCI implant was way back in 1998.
1998 at Georgia Tech.
That's amazing.
It was a stroke patient who could then control a computer cursor using basically just their thoughts. That's incredible.
A lot of thanks to that implanted interface.
It really ignited the field, even with the tech back then being more basic. It proved this wild concept, it could work. And that journey from 1998 to today, it's been something else, really highlights how far we've come. The complexity of these devices now, it's remarkable.
It really is, to think about it. So for those of us who aren't, neuroscientists, let's break down the tech a bit. When we talk iBCIs, we hear a lot about electrodes. What are they, really? Why so crucial?
Electrodes, well, think of them as the interpreters. The link between the brain's language, it's intricate, and the electronics of the iBCI.
Okay.
So they're basically tiny sensors. They detect electrical activity from neurons. Those brain cells that communicate using, you guessed it, electrical signals.
So they're eavesdropping on the brain's conversations.
Kind of, yeah, like they pick up those neural whispers, right?
Right.
And transmit that to the iBCI's processing unit, which then, this is key, decodes them, translates them into commands.
Fascinating.
What's interesting is this Nature review, it highlights 4 main types of electrodes used in these trials, each with, pros and cons.
Like choosing the right tool for the job. Except the job is deciphering the human brain, which is wow. So what are the key differences?
So first up, we've got neurotrophic electrodes,
Okay.
NTEs.
NTEs?
The cool thing is they're designed to get neurons to grow into the electrode itself.
Really? Yeah.
Which makes a super stable, long-lasting connection. We're talking years, decades even, potentially.
Decades of signal stability. That's incredible, though.
It is. Durability is important. You're talking about implants in a very sensitive organ, right?
Any drawbacks with NTEs, though? There's got to be a trade-off.
Yeah, they might not be as precise.
I see.
Like, imagine a wide-angle lens versus zoom.
Ah, okay.
NTEs, great for an overview of brain activity, but the nuances, individual neurons firing, that sort of thing, not so much.
Makes sense. So precision's key. What then?
That's where microelectrode arrays come in. MEAs, these are like the high-res cameras of the iBCI world. Tiny, densely packed electrodes, often in a grid, so they pick up signals from very specific groups of neurons.
Wow. So we've got NTEs, long-term, MEAs, precision. What about the other two?
Right, so electrocorticography arrays, or ECOGs, they're less invasive.
Less invasive how?
Instead of going directly into brain tissue, they sit on the surface, under that protective dura layer.
So less risk with surgery and long-term, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. ECOGs are established tech actually used already in epilepsy treatment.
Interesting.
So because they don't pierce the brain tissue, less chance of damage or inflammation.
It's amazing how one area of medicine can lead to breakthroughs in others.
Totally. Then the final type, endovascular arrays. EVAs. Now, these are really promising, minimizing invasiveness. They're implanted in the brain's blood vessels.
In the blood vessel.
Yeah, so no open brain surgery needed at all.
That's incredible, like it's something out of a movie, but in a good way.
It's a game changer. Think less risk for the patient, quicker recovery. Procedures similar to putting in stents.
Wow. Okay, so you've got these amazing electrodes listening to the brain, but that's just the beginning, right? It really is more than just electrodes. It's a whole system.
Exactly. Like, think of the electrodes as the pickup on an electric guitar. They're capturing that raw sound, but you need the amp, the effects, the skill of the musician to turn it into music.
Right.
Those brain signals, they're just the start.
So what else is going on to make this tech work?
That's where the magic happens, and the challenges. It's not enough to listen to the brain, you have to understand it. So you need algorithms, machine learning, all that. Imagine sifting through hours of raw audio just to find a few clear sentences. Wow.
That's kind of what these iBCI systems are doing. Filtering noise, finding patterns, turning those patterns into commands.
Like finding a needle in a haystack of electrical activity. To stick with the music analogy, it's like software that hears a riff and writes out the sheet music.
Exactly. And like any tech, reliability is key. User-friendliness too. These things have to integrate seamlessly into someone's life.
It can't be a burden, it has to just work.
Exactly. Imagine you're controlling a prosthetic and the software crashes, or you need to say something urgently and the speech synthesizer freezes. That's what researchers are up against.
It's a good reminder this is still early days, even though, like we said, it's been around for decades.
It has, but that brings us to another point, this valley of death. The Nature Review talks about it, that gap between promising tech and it actually being available to people. Why does that happen? If it's life-changing, shouldn't people, want it?
You'd think so, but it's complicated. There's the cost. These devices are expensive to make.
Right.
Then there's insurance. Will they cover it? Big question.
And what about training doctors to actually use this stuff? That's a whole other thing.
Exactly. You need people who can implant it safely, monitor it, adjust it if needed. It's not just inventing something cool. You have to build the whole system around it.
And that takes time.
And collaboration. The Nature Review, they really stress data sharing.
Yeah.
And this idea of a centralized patient registry.
What are those and why are they so important?
So right now, a lot of the data from trials, it's siloed. Individual research groups have it, which makes sense to a point, but it slows things down. Imagine we could pull all that data, keep it anonymous, of course, but make it accessible. We could learn so much faster.
Many hands make light work, as they say.
Exactly. And that's the registry, too. A database tracks everything. Demographics, what type of implant, how well it's working, even how long individual electrodes last. It gives us a bigger picture.
So instead of individual studies, we see the whole puzzle.
And that leads to workforce development. If iBCIs are going to be part of healthcare, we need people who understand them.
Specialists, right? Like with any new medical field.
You got it. Surgeons who can do these implants, neurologists to keep an eye on things, therapists to help patients adapt. And this workforce, it needs to reflect the diversity of patients. That's crucial.
It's a lot to consider. It feels like we're left with this sense of potential, but also a lot of work ahead.
Definitely. We've gone from late 20th century sci-fi to the cutting edge of neuroscience, and this is just scratching the surface.
But we've learned a lot. iBCIs could be revolutionary for people with paralysis, speech impairments, so many conditions.
But it's not just about the tech itself. It's the ethics, the access, the collaboration. It's a journey, and it takes all of us.
It really does. So to our listeners, keep asking questions, stay curious, and imagine what's possible. Because this is just the beginning.
Couldn't say it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Please subscribe to my channel.